The Atlanta Story is a podcast highlighting Atlanta's most interesting creators, entrepreneurs, and builders. If you are curious, self-starting, and creative, this is the podcast for you. I'm Jon Birdsong with Atlanta Ventures, and in today's episode, we have Ron Hsu, owner and head chef at Lazy Betty. Ron grew up in the industry working at his mother's restaurants. After dropping out of University of Georgia to chase his culinary dreams, he ended up spending 10 years at New York's Le Bernardin, training under Eric Ripert. We talk about Ron's move back to Atlanta, the genesis story behind his new restaurant, Lazy Betty, and the constant back and forth between the chef and entrepreneur roles he plays today. We hope you enjoy the show and subscribe to the Atlanta Story. Good afternoon, morning, and evening. We are at Atlanta Tech Village in the Atlanta Ventures studio, recording the Atlanta Story podcast. Today we have Chef Ron Hsu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, John.
Very excited to learn more about your entrepreneurial journey, the skills and stories around what got you to where you are today. Just a quick little background on Chef Ron. Chef Ron left UGA as a business major to follow your dreams, carry on the family legacy, and add to the growing restaurant empire built with your brother and sister. Mm-hmm. After working 10 years in New York City, most notably as the creative director and sous chef at 3 Michelin star restaurant Le Bernardin, Ron came back to Atlanta. So lots of stuff we want to touch there. In 2019, Chef Ron opened Lazy Betty. Since then, y'all have been awarded Eater's 2019 Atlanta Restaurant of the Year. Been named one of the best restaurants in the country by Thrillist and one of Atlanta's top new restaurants by Condé Nast, just to name a few. Of course, the name Lazy Betty was inspired by your late mother who passed away last year. Our condolences. But her legacy is still very strong through her family today. Let's start today with, let's go back to college, UGA. Mm-hmm. Where did you find the courage to drop out and follow your dreams? It's so easy to say, but so hard to do.
I don't know if it was courage that I had. It was probably more just being naive. I was in my third year of UGA, and I was going through that whole quarter-life crisis thing, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I had always worked part-time in restaurants, cooking. I was the social chairman of my fraternity that I was in, and everything that I did always was food-centric. And I was having a deep conversation with my roommate at the time, and he was like, why don't you consider pursuing a career in the culinary arts? And it never struck me as a real career path, simply because I always figured my parents wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer or an architect or something more white collar. And so when I had that conversation, I was like, well, you should think about it. And I did. And I worked up the courage to talk to my mom and kind of get her blessing, who is Betty, as John referenced earlier. And she was the one that really was like, if that's what you want, you should pursue your dreams. And I did. And my mom was like, you should drop out. Don't waste your time. So my deal was, if I decide to do this, I will get my business degree first, and then I could pursue a degree in the culinary arts.
Sure.
Yeah. And
so this was mid-year, junior year?
Yeah, I would say it was 2003.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're already halfway through, and you're just kind of like...
Yeah, let's be clear. I was in my third year, but I was technically a sophomore.
Right.
So, yeah.
Nice. And just made the decision. You said, let's do it.
I did. And it probably wouldn't have materialized as fast if my mom didn't give me her blessing. Because she was such a big influence in my life. And she went through so much trying to run a restaurant, and she probably didn't want me. I just assumed she didn't want me to go through the same struggles she did trying to be a restaurateur.
Yes. So we lost Betty Sue last year. I saw in your Facebook post you put hardworking, vivacious, selfless, she could bring people across the world and break barriers to make them feel like family and loved. So give me a story of hardworking that really shares what your mom, her hardworking legacy.
I think the story that resonates with me most is before I was even born. Is she came over from Taiwan with $20 in her pocket, 20 US dollars in her pocket, and didn't speak a lick of English. Came over and landed in San Francisco and took a job as basically a live-in nanny. And she helped the family raise a couple kids, all while getting her housing paid for with the family and also learning English. And she just managed to save all the money she could. She also worked in restaurants during that time as well. So
she ran 5 restaurants throughout, the suburbs of Atlanta, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at her peak, she had, I think, 5 restaurants. Yep. Yeah.
And I assume she had family members working.
She did. She was also a bit of a pioneer in that she helped immigrate a lot of her brothers and sisters over from Malaysia. 8? It was 7. 7. Okay. That's right. And countless other employees too. And she just helped facilitated them, finding a better life and moving over she literally grew up in a little village where she had to go to the local well to get up with a pail of water, like no electricity and stuff like that. And kind of.
So she set an amazing example. Her blessing was something that gave you confidence to make that decision. And then you went to culinary school. Correct?
That's right. Yep. I went to culinary school in Sydney, Australia. I was at the time looking into a study abroad program through the University of Georgia. And my mother was like, look, if you still want to go travel, why don't you see if Australia, which was my destination of choice, had a culinary program that I liked. Mm-hmm. And I did. And my mom's like, you should go do it. And
this was setting you on the path of fine dining early on. Is that right? I mean, did you have that vision?
I never knew I wanted to do fine dining. I always liked reading cookbooks, and there were chefs that I admired, like Eric Ripert, and I think just the style of food is what resonated with me the most. It appealed to me a lot, and it was never like I have to do fine dining.
Sure.
I really appreciated the craft behind doing that kind of food.
Well, we definitely want to dive into the art. Let's talk about the transformation to. Every entrepreneur at some point, they've got to make that decision of I'm going to go make that leap, right? And you spent 10 years up in New York, sous chef, creative director. Was there something in the back of your mind that always said, I'm going to go start my own restaurant?
Yeah, that little voice has always been in the back of my head. I remember when I was still in New York, I was out drinking with one of my fellow coworkers, and I always knew that I wanted to open up a restaurant, and I never really knew how to materialize that. I knew there was a style of cooking I had to get out there, but I didn't know, like, all right, what do I need to do to raise the money and find support and how to market this properly and all that. But it was always something that was deep inside of me. And I would say that was probably about 5 years into New York.
Got it.
Yep.
And then 5 years into New York, when did you know you were ready to move back to Atlanta and really start taking that next step?
I'll be honest, I never knew that I was ready. I think, it's like you just have to be able to risk it.
Sure.
Restaurants are in terms of other investments, are one of the higher risk investments out there, especially the concept that I wanted to do. For me, it was just, I always had this point of view, and it's probably being raised by my mom had a big part of it was, you got to go for your dreams, and you got to try, because there were other things in my career that when I reflected, I was like, yeah, if I wish I tried it, and I didn't, and now I regret it. And I was like, well, if I don't try to achieve this, then in hindsight, I may regret it. And I didn't want to live my life without that regret.
Absolutely.
Or with that regret, I mean. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the mentorship over the years. I mean, in the culinary world, mentorship is so huge, right? The the head chef at Le Bernardin was Eric Repair. And how do you get the most out of a mentorship?
For me, it was just observing and really soaking in all the time that I had with Chef Repair. I kind of had two or three mentors at Le Bernardin. One was Chef Repair's right-hand man, which was Chris Muller, and his other chef that ran their kitchen, which was Eric Giselle. Both were very complimentary of each other. One was a very good organizer on how to run a kitchen. The other one was more about the craft itself. I always viewed Chef Repair as more just not even a mentor in terms of the restaurant, but just life and how to approach life.
Would you ask them for coffee and pick their brain, or would it be more ad hoc?
It would be more ad hoc. Chef Repair was so busy. The few minutes that I did have with Chef Repair, which was a lot more than the other sous chefs or other staff members at Le Bernardin, was just in between. As you mentioned, I was a creative director, so part of my job was to come up with dishes. So during those little 45-minute, 1-hour sessions I had with Chef Repair when we talked to menu was when I really just observed things he would do and preach.
Sure.
And that's kind of how I picked up on it. Now that I've moved past Le Bernardin, I have talked to him a few times and got his advice. But it was never a formal like mentor apprentice kind of relationship. It was just more
it's
like
all ad hoc and
all ad hoc.
And so how are you a mentor to the team at Lazy Betty today then?
It depends on the person that I'm talking to. I think right now on my staff, I have 3 former executive chefs. And then I also have two chefs that this Lazy Betty is their first restaurant where they're actually on the line cooking. For example, one person that works our salad station has managed kitchens but never been so hands-on with food. So she's very sharp in terms of like knowing her responsibilities and being punctual and how to carry herself, but she doesn't know proper knife technique, the actual craft of cooking. And the other person I have who's ran a couple restaurants in New York and Atlanta. He's very sharp. He knows how to manage people, but he has his own challenges and things that I try to mentor him on. So it really depends on the individual themselves. On
beautiful.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Lazy Betty and let's go straight to the menu. I know you've talked about Lazy Betty and the menu. It's a tasting menu and it's cross culture. What really forced you to decide that, or opened you up to decide it being cross culture, and what does that mean?
For me, it was just a reflection of my upbringing. One of my partner is Aaron Phillips, who also is very in tune with all the other cultures and incorporating those flavor profiles. So it wasn't something that we forced. It was just something that we love. I'm Chinese. I grew up in 45 minutes south of the airport. So just, me growing up, I had a lot of different cultures influencing me. So it was just a reflection of my personal style.
So when y'all, are on the big whiteboard and you're just throwing stuff up and you're like, okay, this sounds good. This would be good. This would be great. Let's cut this. Like how is that creative process dialed in?
Well, we do have a framework that we use. There's a few golden rules. The one is it has to taste good. The second one is that it needs to incorporate some kind of intellectual value somehow, whether it's through a technique, like it could be a very cool technique or a very unique ingredient, like some kind of very special wasabi sourced in the valleys of the mountains in Kyoto, Japan, something like that. Or, for me, one thing that's important, it also needs to hit a little familiarity. I like at our price point, people think we're very luxurious and high end, and I think there's always a balance between being on that spectrum and also, when you eat something, you want it to kind of nourish your soul. So that's another kind of
part of the framework.
Part of the framework that we try to build dishes with. But the actual process it can be like, hey chef, like for example Austin Geitzman, my sous chef, is very good at creating dishes, and he's always bringing things to the table. So he'll be like, what, it could be very spur of the moment, hey, what do you think about this sauce?
Yep.
What do you think about that? Or it could be very organized, like, all right, let's, sounds like you got something good there, let's nail down a time to do a tasting next week, and me, Austin, and my chef partner Aaron will taste it and we'll deliberate.
So I want to talk about that. We were talking a little bit early on, and this is one of the pillars of the framework, which I think is fascinating. But as a chef, how do you know something is good? And two, how do you continue to refine your palate?
Well, I think I got part of me was very lucky to work at Le Bernardin, and they concentrate really on flavors. Their food and techniques are very simple, and they focus more on the quality of product and the flavor itself. And working the sauce station at Le Bernardin, when you're making 20 to 30 sauces a day and constantly tasting each one over and over, you develop a palate. Sure. And you understand what people like, and you understand balance and all that.
Can you be a good chef without having a good palate?
That's a good question. People have asked me that a lot. I would say yes, because at the end of the day, there's different degrees of a chef. You could be the chef of a pizza restaurant and know how to make great pizza, but then if you go into a very high-end French restaurant, you may not be able to be a chef there. But at the end of the day...
Got it. So it's where you've been trained and refined and...
Yeah, and I think the word chef, it has different... what's the word I'm looking for? A chef will have different responsibilities depending on the type of restaurant. Mm-hmm. For example, Chris, the guy that I mentioned earlier, who ran Le Bernardin, he was just a very good organizer. Yep. He could catch a problem 2 days out before it came across, just because he was good at organizing and running the business side and operations side. Eric Giselle, who was the other chef above me at Le Bernardin, was just a good chef because he knew the craft so well. He had a great palate. He was allergic to shellfish and like I don't know, 20 other spices, but he can make the best lobster bisque without ever tasting it, just by smelling it. Like, really? You see his nostrils like flaring up and down when he makes it. So
as a consumer, give us a way to understand a menu, right? When a patron goes into Lazy Betty, there's a 7-course meal, 10-course meal, and how should a consumer evaluate that, and what story are they looking? Should they be looking for?
I think what they should be looking for is having a different experience, be open-minded in their approach, look for different flavor profiles. We try to take the diner on a culinary journey where they get different sensations on their palate, whether it's bitter, sour, Asian, French, American, and just different textural elements too.
Sure. Yeah, it's a full journey,
right? Almost
like listening to a record from front to end.
Exactly. And one thing we try to do is curate not just curate an experience, and not just through the palate, but also through, how can you pique the diner's interest somehow? Is that through a story? Is that through how we develop the dish? One of the dishes we opened up the restaurant with was called truffle hunting, and it was basically like a little mosaic of the wilderness. You see a little pile of soil, some little carrots growing out of it, and underneath the soil you'll find some truffles. So that was a way for us to feature the Georgia landscape, where we use locally foraged ingredients. We did a potato soil, so it wasn't actually soil, it was made from potato dust. But then we put the diner in the mindset that they're like foraging, and then if they dig underneath the dirt, they'll find truffles. So that's one way we try to do, have the diners kind of experience their dinner.
And relating that to your narrative of, born and raised, or raised in Georgia, Atlanta, and then New York City for 10 years, and then coming back, exploring, you're almost re-exploring the city, you're re-exploring Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
From a culinary perspective, how have you done that? Whether it's through local farmers or how did you get the word out that like, all right, this is happening and this is what I'm looking for?
Well, the first thing that we did was we started hosting supper clubs.
Mm-hmm.
The first 2 or 3 were at my brother and sister's restaurant, Sweet Auburn Barbecue. And we would hold these supper clubs for a very small amount of people, like anywhere from 10 to 12 people. Usually they were just friends or relatives. That was maybe the first 3 or 4.
So flexible, creative ability there to kind of test things.
Yeah, I hate to call them this, but they were kind of my guinea pigs at that time. And
early adopters.
Early adopters, yep. And we kind of worked out the kinks logistically.
How many
on
did
operations.
You have?
We did at first we only did once a month for the first 3 months, and then we ramped that up to twice a month and then maybe after 6 months we started doing them every weekend.
Okay. Wow. So the authentic demand.
Yes, we would kind of let the product or the market kind of dictate to us how much supply should we give them. And the more we did it, the more they talked about it, the more their friends would be like, hey, can I get another seat? Mm-hmm. And once we kind of hit that tipping point, well, all right, well, maybe we need to go from once a month to twice a month.
At this point, you are marketing a concept that's still unnamed.
Yep.
You are marketing a concept that has no location.
Yeah.
As a chef today, is it more important to have a personal brand or a restaurant brand?
I think for the kind of food I'm doing,
right.
It's more important to have a personal brand because I think people, especially a taste menu, they want to go eat and see the food from a chef's point of view, not from a big corporate kind of formulaic restaurant model.
Is that different today because of social media?
Yeah, I think social media is a big vehicle for marketing, especially in restaurants. First and foremost, people eat with their eyes. And it's such a fast way to translate information across so many different people. And I think, word of mouth is always the best form of advertising, in my opinion. And, I'll trust your palate over just a random person than like a Yelp review.
Sure.
And I think social media, because it's such a community-centric kind of platform, that you will tend to trust people that you're following or people that you follow, or or vice versa.
So you've got all of this pent-up demand. You know that what you are producing and the product you're putting on the table, people are excited about. And so this momentum carries into, all right, well, we got to find a location.
Right.
Walk us through that decision process, knowing that when you go to Lazy Betty, it's not a $50 meal. It's not a $100 meal. It's up there, $165.
Right.
With alcohol and wine tasting, you're walking out there. How did you decide on Candler Park? And let's start there.
Sure. It's funny you asked that question because people ask that all the time. I think actually one of our Yelp or Google reviews, someone gave us a 1-star review because we weren't in Buckhead. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, we can't really change that. And the price point reflects a Buckhead restaurant. But for me, I wanted to do something that really appealed to the locals. And, Buckhead, there's a lot of locals in Buckhead, but it's dominated by a lot of big corporate restaurants. And, you see all these high rises up there. And I wanted to appeal more to like the neighborhood and the community of Atlanta. And for me, if you were in Atlanta 15, 20 years ago, Little 5 Points is still generally the same. There's been a little gentrification going on, but it's still kind of grungy, and you can find your tattoo parlors there. Yep. And we were like, let's try to keep it in this neighborhood. And Candler Park has proven to be a neighborhood that can sustain restaurants. People want to go out to eat.
Yep. Staple House helped kind of be the pioneer there.
Yep. You're exactly right. And in terms of the demographics, the people in Candler Park do have the money to go out to eat. It was also a younger, I believe the median age is around 34 roughly, and that's exactly who we wanted to appeal to.
Sure.
People that, you know, could afford it and like to dine out as not just a form of sustenance, but entertainment.
And we're going to take a quick break here and share that this podcast is brought to you by Atlanta Ventures. If you are looking to start the next $300 million business out of Atlanta, check out the studio at atlantaventures.com. Do you think that there's a market of Lazy Betty customers will grow around Candler Park more than, let's say, Buckhead in the future?
I don't know if we opened it because we thought the market would grow in Candler Park. I think one advantage of Lazy Betty is that we're a destination restaurant. You know, and I never wanted Lazy Betty to be in a location where it was front and center, like this is where Lazy Betty is. I think part of the appeal is that it's kind of off the beaten track. You know, you've been there to eat, and you know we're kind of nestled in this complex where we have, basically the Rush Center, which promotes, equality amongst the gay and lesbian community.
Yep.
And there's like a little yoga studio right behind us. You wouldn't expect a restaurant like this to be in this kind of complex.
Sure.
And that was a real appeal to us, is we wanted to be more, let's handle our marketing, or let's have a location that's geared more towards word of mouth marketing. Sure. And kind of,
versus on Peachtree Street.
Like screaming in your face. That's and that's kind of how our pop-ups kind of materialized, was word of mouth.
And is that characteristic to your style as a restaurateur and an entrepreneur?
I'll be honest, I'm still trying to figure out my style as a restaurateur / entrepreneur. I know I'm an entrepreneur, but first and foremost, I still myself as a chef. Sure. And I didn't really think of myself as an entrepreneur until like, I would say 6 months before we opened. And I was like, yeah, I guess I am. But.
So let's talk about that process of you have this authentic demand. When did you say, all right, I'm going to decide the location, pick the name, and I'm going to go out and raise money?
That's a great question. So the name was always in the back of my mind. Lazy Betty was something that my sister kind of threw out there before I moved back to Atlanta. My sister picked me up from the airport. I took a red eye home, and my mother Betty was babysitting my niece and nephew at my sister's house, and I was staying at her house that weekend. And we pulled up to her house and we opened the front door, and my mom was kind of just passed out on the couch with a little drool coming out of her mouth, laundry everywhere. My mom was like, yeah, that's our or my sister was like, yes, that's our mom, Lazy Betty. And we're like, yeah, that's funny, and it just kind of stuck. But we got the answers to a lot of our questions that you just asked, such as like the neighborhood, price point, the name, through our pop-ups. So at the end of our pop-ups, we would give a little survey out that asked a lot of different questions. What do you think about the price point? What do you think about the format of the dinner? What do you think about this location? What did you think about the name? And we probably had about 800 surveys at the end of a year doing these pop-ups. And, we would read them all up and kind of...
So how did you analyze that data? Did you read every one?
I read every single one, yeah. And I mean, I didn't take statistics. It was just more of a general feel. One question that I asked was, do you dine out? Are you more inclined to dine out on a Sunday or Monday? Because I knew we wanted to be closed certain days of the week. And I would say about 65% of them was they dine out on Sundays instead of a Monday. So that's how we made the decision to open up, knowing that we would be closed on Mondays. The name was one that I would say most of the people liked it. Some people didn't understand the name. With the concept, they thought it was a little, casual and and it wasn't reflective of our price point. But once the brick and mortar opened up and our branding package came to fruition, they were like, oh yeah,
it nails the high end but approachable vibe.
Yeah, it does. I think because we weren't working with our own space, and our full the full product that we wanted
Sure.
without the brick and mortar. People didn't understand why that name worked.
Was it tough to raise money?
It was not because I don't think people. For me, it was just.
Your first.
It was my first time.
Yep.
I'll be honest. When I was composing the pro forma on Excel, I was literally putting a formula in each cell, and my wife, who was very smart and has a finance background, was like, "What are you doing? Why do you keep putting the cells in like that?" And she was like, "If you just push the little button on the bottom right or the it'll." And I was like, "Oh my God!" Like it probably took me a month to develop the pro forma, and after that, I was like, she kind of helped me along the ways in, compiling that aspect of it.
In the Atlanta Ventures world, we find entrepreneurs when they go and go out and raise money, if you get one lead that sets the term and then you get other people to come in and fill the round. Was it a similar process?
It was kind of like that. I was very lucky to have an old friend of mine's mother kind of guide me through this whole process. She started a nonprofit, and she kind of had to raise money too. And she really, really guided me through the whole process, helped me evolve the business plan, the pitch. And I always had a lot of friends that were in New York that were always like, when you want to open up your restaurant, let me know. I'll invest. But I never knew how to formulate the plan or
Sure.
the raise and all that.
And this isn't uncharted territory with the Hsu family. I mean, you're like, as you mentioned, Howard and Anita, they own Sweet Auburn,
Right.
and so I'm sure you're able to bounce ideas off of how that works, and
Right.
they're probably supportive of that. How were they instrumental in helping you?
They were
Besides Howard being the big older brother that.
Well, it's funny. They were very instrumental, but not in the way you would think. So the whole plan was, before I moved down, was that I didn't have any assets to put on to ask for an SBA.
Sure.
And they did. They had the businesses. They had Sweet Auburn as collateral, and all this other stuff. So we were like, all right, well, come on down. We'll partner up. We'll be the signee on the dotted line for the SBA. Blah blah blah. And we were like, all right, let's do it. So we moved down, and while we were doing all the pop-ups and all the groundwork to open up the restaurant, they came to me one weekend and was like, Ron, we got to talk to you about something. And it was basically that the SBA didn't go through. So what had happened, I guess their business got a little slow. They also put me on their payroll, which was a big salary for the Atlanta market. And they're like, look, the bank says our cash flow is not good enough to fund this high-end restaurant. And for me, it was a side of necessity. I was like, well, shit, man. Am I allowed to curse?
Yeah.
All right. Well, shit. Like, I just moved my wife down here. She's pregnant.
Yep.
My partner, Aaron, also gave up his job, moved his wife down to Atlanta. And I was like, I got to make this happen. And that's when I was like, all right, well, if I can't get it through an SB, I'm going to have to raise the money.
Yep.
And I literally just started talking to my friends who were in finance up in New York. They gave me a lot of ideas. And I just started talking to all my friends that have always been like, I'll invest. And I was like, all right, well, what does that mean? How does that look? Like, how do I evaluate the business? And I probably had to go through 4 different pitches before it really got honed in on.
Did you create a pitch deck?
I did. Yeah. I created a pitch deck. I created everything, a pro forma.
Because if you're gonna bet on someone's story, if it's a first time, I mean, there's yours is a good one to bet on from a training perspective, from an experience perspective,
right?
And we see it all the time where it's so much about the authentic demand and the product market fit.
Right.
Regardless of how talented an entrepreneur is, right? Yeah. And so there's some luck involved.
Oh, there's a lot of luck. I think you hit the nail right on the head. They believed in me in terms of knowing the job and being able to produce good food, but they didn't know if I could actually run a business, which was always the big risk.
Well, I want to talk about the future in a little bit, but I also want to let's go back to Chef Ron, the artist, right? And so I heard that, when you were the creative director at Le Bardin, you had there's an environment there where you could get very creative,
Right.
and really flex those creative muscles.
Yeah, I came. So the way I got offered that job was I kind of did a lot of R&D on my first stint at Le Bernard. So I was there at two separate occasions. The first stint lasted about 7 years, and R&D was a big part of my forte then. And then I left and and worked as an executive chef at a French Vietnamese restaurant for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back on the job market.
Colonial.
Yep, Le Colonial, which that one just opened up in Buckhead actually. But then I wanted to get back into fine dining.
Yeah.
And when I went back on the job market, Chef Repair got a few phone calls on me as a reference for me, but then was like, hey, maybe Ronald will come back and help me develop this R&D program and be my creative director. And he was like, look, you come in, half your time you just do R&D, create new dishes. And Le Bernardin's a very successful restaurant. And so they had the money to just kind of really devote their resources into that. So, they're like, order whatever you want, order any kind of equipment, do whatever you want. I just want you to, I don't want to put any kind of obstacles or restrictions on your creative muscles. And if you want to order a pound of caviar to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so he really facilitated that for me.
So as an artist, how do you reinvent yourself and continually to push the limits creatively, but also stay true to what's gotten you there?
Well, first and foremost, working in a restaurant is a team collaboration. For me, I really love a lot of Asian things. I'm a little more ingredient focused. But at Lazy Betty, I rely so much on my other chefs like Aaron Phillips and Austin Geisman, who make up the core management team. And I always look to them. Hey, what do you guys think about this? Or do you guys have any ideas? And we collaborate all together, and we do tastings and stuff like that. So even though Lazy Betty is kind of my brainchild, it has to evolve with the rest of the team. And I think because of that, it just evolves itself.
So collaborative values in the organization versus
just this is my way. Yeah, and that's something that I learned from Chef Repair. Many times we would have the collective management team at Le Bernardin come together around a plate, whether it's 3 people or 8 people, and we would all talk. And it was never a hard rule that the majority won, but it was also just get feedback. And many times people would throw ideas out there, and it would be a bad idea. It would maybe set the dish back 3 steps, but going back 3 steps may go down a different path, which will give you a better result at the end. And that happens all the time.
Really?
With our recipes, yeah. So.
And how do you iterate on that? Because those type of learnings and fast failures
right
help refine the process and eventually the product.
I tell people that, especially right now at Lazy Betty, when we're conceptualizing recipes, it's not because I think I have the best palate. It's because I know a proven process. This was my main thing at Le Bernardin, and I did it for Chef Repair and his other concepts, whether they were at his other restaurants in the Ritz-Carltons or whatever things he had, right? I understood the process.
What does that process look like in your world?
It's basically starting from the ground up with the dish, whether it's focusing on the protein or a vegetable or a sauce, and then it's exploring the options on it, like taste this sauce with this vegetable. If that works, great. If not, got it. You can kind of push that to the side.
And so in your mind, you're literally slicing variables, and then it's like,
Yeah, and then exactly. You might start with a blunt end, but then going through this process, you come to a sharp point, and then you're like, oh yeah, that works.
Yeah. That makes sense. So talk to us about switching gears here. Final table.
Oh yeah.
You've got 40 of the best chefs in the world?
I think it was 22. The final number. But they started off with 40, and then they flew us out to LA, and they among the 40, they were like, we're going to nail it down to 22 people. So yeah.
Now, I know we could talk a lot about just the whole process, but give us some of the big takeaways from Final Table. What did you learn? What things did you take away from doing that from doing that exercise and that experience?
Well, for me, like I was very attuned to how to cook under pressure and how to think on the fly. In terms of like how would you work a competition like that? For me, it was just more about the elaborate construction of a set and the production behind shooting a TV show. I mean, the set itself was probably, and it was like an empty warehouse, maybe the size of a basketball court or basketball stadium or arena. And one day they had us do a little interviews in there, and then the next day we came in and it was like a full on set. And I was like, I don't know how they transformed it overnight.
Magic.
Raising like the stages would be on a platform that would go up and down, cameras on all these zip wires across the stage. But for me it was just mind boggling to see the level of talent they got on the show.
Yep.
I remember meeting Mark Best, who once held a very highly regarded restaurant in Australia. It was on the top 50 list for the Pellegrino top 50 restaurants for a very long time. And I remember reading his cookbook before I got on the plane.
Yeah.
And then when I showed up in LA, I was like, oh yeah, you're Mark Best. And I was like, are you a judge? And he was like, no, I'm a competitor. I was like, oh my God, I was reading your cookbook a week ago and now I'm gonna be competing against you. Like, so yeah.
Let's bring it back to the personal side. You're a father.
Mm-hmm.
How has being a father, your recent father, within a year?
17 months
17
now.
months. Yeah. How has that changed your work schedule? How has that changed you as a chef?
I think it's changed me more in terms of how I want to run the business and how to have a better work-life balance. It also has recalibrated my values and what I really want to prioritize in my life. When I was in New York, I was single, no kids. I was like, yeah, I'm cool working an 80-plus hour work week. Like, just balls to the wall. Let's just work. Mm-hmm. But now that I'm a business owner and I have a family, I'm just like, well, if I want to make it in the long run and not be burnt out in 10 years, I need to have a better work balance. I also knew growing up, I didn't get to see my parents very much because they were working all the time, and I didn't want that to be something I regretted. Being that I'm lucky enough that I can, dictate my own schedule, that I have a very good team that can hold it down for me. So generally, I do a lot of my work now during the daytime, and then on busier days I'll work into the nighttime, or when I have a VIP like you coming in to eat, then I'll stay later. But generally, I can leave. I don't have to stay till 10 or 11 o'clock at night.
Right.
And that's because I try to prioritize spending time with my family. So I'm on morning duty with the baby, and if I don't see my baby during the morning, then I don't see her the whole day. So my team has been lucky enough to let me to hold it down so that I can leave early enough so I can still get 6 to 8 hours of sleep and get up in time and hang out with my baby. So
beautiful. A couple more questions. Atlanta does not have a Michelin star restaurant.
Yeah, that's correct.
Why is that?
Well, the Michelin does not come to Atlanta, so that I would say that's the main reason why. Yeah. I think a good indicator of whether or not the Michelin will come to Atlanta is if you can see a lot of European companies come into Atlanta, and Michelin first and foremost is a tire company, right, which promotes tourism, and I think having Porsche, Mercedes, Audi all make Atlanta the headquarters within the last 5 to 10 years is a good indicator that the Michelin may come to Atlanta. So that would be great, but that's not why we opened up in Atlanta. But yeah, if they came, that would be a huge boon for the food industry. I think it would kind of legitimize Atlanta as a foodie town.
Sure. I mean, even in the last 10 years, when I'm sure when you left to New York and then came back and just saw the evolution, fast forward 10 years to today, right, it's got to be mind-boggling just how much more advanced it's become.
Oh yeah. I think just the overall sophistication of the market in terms of what diners like to see and what they like to experience has grown a lot, and just the overall talent level of chefs have increased a lot. But the thing that what I think is the best is that there's a underground culture of food in Atlanta, and pop-ups you see everywhere, and they can be from very casual kind of concepts like doing a ramen pop-up or doing a full-on tasting menu. And Atlanta supports all these like aspiring artists and young struggling artists, and I think that's really is what's going to start the wave of pushing the food forward, is promoting all these people that want to express their craft.
How is that developed in a community perspective, right? So if you have a lot of these aspiring chefs and folks that want to put their footprint on the culinary scene, is it more pop-ups? How is that community fostered?
I think Atlanta is the type of market that really loves to promote homegrown talent.
Yeah.
And a lot of these pop-ups are people that are from Atlanta and don't have a lot of money and need, a little backing to kind of push them forward.
Yeah. You can see it even on your Instagram, the amount of promoting that you do of other restaurants is pretty cool.
Yeah, I find it very important to kind of help people that don't have that haven't gotten there yet.
Sure.
And I think that pushes food forward, and anything that can elevate the food community will end up elevating the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
For example, Joey Ward just opened up a phenomenal restaurant, Georgia Boy and Southern Belle, and they're only 2 miles away, and a lot of people look at them as competitors to us, which they are, but competition will breed a better product for the whole market. And for me, I'm like, you know what? It'll keep us honest.
Yeah.
It'll make us elevate our product. And
world of abundance.
Exactly. If they keep pushing us, we'll push them. And at the end of the day, it'll just it'll make everything better.
Sure.
And so, we look at them as friends of the industry instead of real competition. So
well let's talk about 2 more questions. One, what's ahead from a 10-year perspective, right? Lazy Betty's doing great, right. winning tons of awards, and you go there and it's busy.
Right.
But what's the 10-year vision look like?
I think 10-year vision is still trying to figure that out. Obviously, I would love Lazy Betty to still be around, and we're going on we had renewed our lease and things are going good. But there's a few other concepts in my back pocket that I would like to do. It kind of upsets me that there's only a certain part of the Atlanta market that can afford to eat at Lazy Betty. So for me, I would like to be able to develop concepts that can appeal to more people. This is a very, very, so I would actually like to talk past 10 years. I think something that I would like to do, and I think this is only achievable if through scale or volume, is I would love to open up a fast food chain that does actually like high quality food. I think McDonald's and I don't know, Burger King and all of them they're not doing much to like give people good quality food. Mm-hmm. And for me, I would love a way to be able to give people that kind of food, but in a very high quality way. Because for me, food should be a basic human right. Good quality food.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't have to pay hundreds of dollars to get good, nourishing, and tasty food.
Yep.
And so for me, I think if I can have a big enough voice or backing, that's something that I would like to try to
that's an awesome
change the
vision.
Market on.
That's a really awesome vision. Okay, last question. And we always ask folks on the podcast, why Atlanta? And what has Atlanta provided you?
Well, first and foremost, Atlanta is my home. Something that I always wanted to do was come back and kind of get back to the community that made me who I am, that's instilled a lot of the good values that made me who I am today. And for me, it's about pushing the food industry forward and looking back and knowing that I made a good impact. And Atlanta has provided me a good living. I can pay my rent. People have given me tremendous support and really embraced us. So, yeah, I think that's why I picked Atlanta. I don't know if I picked Atlanta or Atlanta picked me, really.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, Chef Ron, thank you for being part of the Atlanta story.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
We really appreciate your time and energy and insight today. This podcast is brought to you by Atlanta Ventures. It was co-produced by JC Lucas and Jon Birdsong. If you are looking to start the next $300 million business in Atlanta, check out the studio at atlantaventures.com and the companies we work with who've done it before. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it at your next coffee meeting or dinner greeting, rate it, and write a benevolent, eloquent review.